Primary Sector Council is an advisory group to Minister Damien O'Connor, and the Minister would like to see a vision for the New Zealand primary sector. And so we are engaged in a progressive conversation with food and fibre organisations across the country to talk with them about the opportunity and challenge that confronts us over the next 20 years, and to discuss how we might organise ourselves in that context. Why have a vision? Well, the short answer to that is almost inarguably there is huge change upon us. We will capture the opportunity inherent in that change and overcome the challenges to the extent that we can work together, pulling in a common direction, generating really high quality policy, finding pathways to mitigate losses, and pulling in a common direction. Happily, we enter this conversation, a dialogue that is well advanced through the country, and there are common themes. Particularly, organisations across the sector are focused on growing value and prosperity. They're focused on environmental sustainability, and often there are a small set of capabilities that they focus on as being the basis of competitive advantage. The primary sector is hugely important to New Zealand's economy. It's 20% of GDP, it's 1 in 10 jobs, it's 14 million productive hectares, it's 75% of merchandise exports, and it needs to continue to grow because there's nothing in the economy, there is no other sector that is going to replace its role in the economy. In fact, when we look at Treasury forecasts, they suggest that the sector should continue to grow at about 2% a year if we are to hold our place in the economy. On the face of it, not too big a challenge since we've been growing at about 4% a year over the last 10 years, but sitting just beneath that headline is the idea that most of that growth has come from the expansion and intensification of dairy, and that may be more challenging as we go into the future. The environmental context looms large. You're all aware of the Paris Accord, you're aware that we're aiming for 1.5 degrees, you're aware that countries around the world are not hitting their targets. That means we will in all likelihood go through 2 degrees on our way to 3 degrees. As we fail to hit our Paris Accord targets, the impacts of climate change will become significantly worse. And that will impose enormous costs and risks on the global economy. That means there are 2 targets. One is mitigation, the second is climate change adaptability. A really important idea is that the pressure on environmental sustainability related issues, and we can talk about emissions and we can talk about water quality, will be unrelenting. Related to that is the idea that social licence will not just be earned from actions taken behind the farm gate. We can talk about effluent systems and riparian planting and fencing waterways, but unless New Zealanders are satisfied that this country is appropriately positioned from an environmental perspective, and that our farming sector are cornerstone stakeholders in that effort, we will not earn a sustainable licence to operate. There is a Māori concept called Taiao: healthy land, healthy water, healthy air. It speaks of the human relationship with nature and being part of nature. And that idea of Taiao is fundamental, in our view, to our positioning as a country going into the future. Of course, it's not just emissions, it's also water quality, it's also biodiversity, it's land and soil quality, it's the health of our oceans. A challenge for our farmers. On the one hand, there is enormous anxiety globally around the environment, around sustainability, around climate change, around the impacts of the climate change for our children, about where we're positioned today, and there's a growing sense of urgency around all of that, and much of the population has a real palpable sense of fear and urgency. But there's a second subject that's about fear and urgency, and that's when you're a farmer working on your land. Maybe you've been on that land for generations. Maybe you're a young farmer and you've got significant debts. And suddenly you're being blamed for 50% of New Zealand's emissions. And people are saying to you, you're going to need to change your farming systems, and we're going to need to plant 1 million hectares or 2 million hectares of trees. And what are you going to do about methane? And you're looking at your future and you're wondering how you're going to farm through this and what exactly it is that people want you to do. And why am I being blamed? I haven't done anything differently. This is not my fault. And by the way, what are the urban dwellers doing? What are they doing in transport? What are we doing in terms of building renewable energy? And that's a source of fear as well. And that means that this dialogue is not just a rational dialogue, it's an emotional dialogue. And it's an emotional dialogue from both perspectives. Somehow as a country, we've got to find a way forward with really good pace. A way forward that enables our farmers to find a future. A way forward that delivers a genuinely sustainable future for us as New Zealanders. And so that is what the dialogue that we are having with the sector is about. So a vision's role, of course, it's got to be future focused, it's got to be aspirational, it's got to represent a future that is environmentally, socially and economically rich for our mokopuna. Otherwise, what's the point? We produce the world's most distinctive, trusted food and fibre that speaks of our land, water and people. Taiao drives our prosperity, innovation and leadership. We are proud kaitiaki. We are good ancestors. We honour the place we call home. But a vision isn't enough. We need a winning strategy. And I'm going to touch on some elements of that strategy in just a moment, but one of the things I'd like to talk about while I'm standing here in Canterbury is I'd like to talk about a regional perspective. Very shortly, Mayor Craig Rowley from the Waimate district here in South Canterbury is going to present, and he's going to talk about what's happening in South Canterbury. And that presentation is absolutely pertinent to the effort ahead of us, because actually we live in a series of communities and it's about people pulling together with a common vision. It's about there being a plan. And so just a plug for Craig, what he's doing, what the Canterbury region is doing is hugely important to what is a national effort. That's Taiao. It's a sort of a working definition of Taiao. It's the idea of a finite biosphere. It's the idea that nature surrounds us and informs the health of our human society. And actually our human society defines the health of our farming communities. At a more prosaic level, we're talking about our air, our water, our land and our life. And we all recognise that the environment is under tremendous pressure. Across the spectrum, we see enormous tensions in this space. When we say, well, yeah, so I'm talking to farmers and they say, Lain, that's all very nice. How can we not agree with you, but so what? How can we find a way into our future? Well, there are pathways. And one of the core ideas that is that this idea of Taiao can be brought into New Zealand, not at the food and fibre level, but at the national level. It's something that we could coalesce around at the sort of the purpose level, is something that we believe in. And the food and fibre sector, second time I've said it today, can be cornerstone stakeholders in that. It's about having the most sustainable farming systems globally. It's about optimising our land use choices. It's about our science and education and capability commercialisation ecosystem being lined up. And it's about high quality, nuanced policy. So that's about investment, that's about regulation, that's about capability. It's about ensuring that that policy is optimised. Same thing in the high value space. There is no example of significant land use change in this country that doesn't have a strong economic rationale. A little secret is that farmers aren't silly. They've already got their land applied to the best land use that they can see today. And it's why we've seen such significant dairy conversion over the last 20 years. Organisations across the country are focused on the high value journey, but almost unarguably, some organisations are much more successful at it than other organisations. So from a strategic perspective, there are things that organisations can do. There is a land use optimisation chunk, there's a capability ecosystem chunk, and of course, there's a national positioning chunk. To some extent, we risk being defined by the lowest common denominator. Finally, there are some things we need to be the best in the world at. Sustainable farming systems. Our capability ecosystem applied to the food and fibre system needs to be optimised and world-class. And finally, we need to be really, really good at building high-value chains at scale. And the short answer at the moment is we're not particularly good. It takes us a long time. We struggle for investment. We don't build value chains. We tend to focus on just building products. I'm done. I'm out of time. I will see you later.